My sister and I were born mortal enemies before we even had bodies. Back when we were floating souls waiting for reincarnation, we were already at each other's throats. She was supposed to be my twin, but sharing was never her thing. She couldn't stand the thought of splitting the spotlight. So she did what any jealous soul would do: she kicked me out of our destined womb and stole the golden ticket for herself, the belly of the wealthiest woman in all of New York. In her mind, she had already won. But what she didn't realize was that the perfect family she chose was a disaster waiting to happen. The billionaire dad was utterly obsessed with his wife, delusionally so. The mom was sweet as pie and clueless as a toddler. And the adopted older brother? A cold, emotionally starved, and dangerously unhinged sociopath. In the end, that charming little psychopath broke my sister down bit by bit until she couldn't even stand on her own 2 feet anymore. Literally. She ended up paralyzed from the waist down. And me? I got stuck with a washed-up, third-rate actress for a mom. Yet somehow, I rose to the top. She clawed her way back into the limelight, and I went from forgotten child star to full-blown national treasure. Consumed by jealousy and hatred, my sister strapped a bomb to her chest and blew us both sky-high, right in the middle of my award speech. I died in the spotlight. And when I opened my eyes again, everything had changed. She had stolen my place. This time, she forced her way into the womb of the very woman she used to mock, my mother, and kicked me aside like trash. This time I'll be the one getting all the love and praise, she declared. I laughed loud and hard. She had no idea I'd come back with a cheat code, a built-in hack, the perfect weapon for surviving that twisted billionaire family. The psycho foster brother? I could wrap him around my finger. That glamorous celeb mom she idolized? She was the real monster hiding in plain sight. My dearest sister, she sneered, dripping with fake sweetness, enjoyed being the new freak of the family. Before I could respond, she shoved me hard into the underworld, diving headfirst toward the mirror that reflected a very pregnant woman, my mom. But I caught the mirror's edge just in time, gripping it tight and refusing to fall from my throne. Nearby, the underworld's young and annoyingly gorgeous ruler, Killian Draven, watched us with an amused look. Is she always this dramatic? He asked, raising an eyebrow. There had been rumors about us. In our past lives, we weren't just reincarnated souls, we were part of a twisted experiment Killian ran, a reincarnation trial that allowed select souls to choose their next lives. Naturally, my sister didn't care about the details. The moment Killian opened his mouth to explain, she cut him off with another one of her signature kicks and lunged for the rich woman's womb. I'm done being her sister. She doesn't deserve me. Killian had no choice but to adapt the experiment on the fly, allowing each of us to choose our own paths. She didn't wait to hear the fine print, and because of that, we never actually heard what Killian was trying to tell us that day. But deep down, I always felt like we missed something important. Now, as I clung to the mirror, refusing to let go, Killian smirked. You're smarter than she is, he said, resting his cheek on his fist. So? So let me tell you what she missed. And suddenly, it all clicked. In the updated version of his experiment, Killian had added 2 special conditions. First, he gave us each a rare ability, the power to hear people's thoughts. Not out loud, but in real time, their inner voices exposed like open books. Second, we were bestowed with once-in-a-lifetime beauty, the kind that could alter fates and bend destinies. He wanted to see what we'd do with those gifts, whether hearing the raw, unfiltered thoughts of a wealthy family would change the way we navigated that world, and whether beauty alone could shift the fate of a girl born into the dirt. Of course, neither of us knew any of this when we first entered the game. Looking back now, it all made sense. My sister probably figured out how messed up that wealthy family really was and started mentally dragging them hard, and they heard every single word. No wonder they turned on her. No wonder that deranged older brother snapped and dragged her down into the depths of his obsession. As for me, my freakish beauty earned me my mom's obsession. She polished me into the perfect product, the ideal idol. But the spotlight was a cage. And she was hell. I looked through the mirror at the actress's swollen belly. A smirk curled on my lips. Congrats, sis. You just checked into my personal nightmare. But this time, I'm not going down without a fight. This time, I'd use my ability right from the start, even from inside the womb. That twisted family? They were going to love me, worship me, and protect me. I gave the king of hell one last glance and said softly, "Thank you, my lord." Then I let go of the mirror. I dove straight into the womb of the billionaire's wife. And just as my soul slipped into the warmth of her body, I heard a panicked shout echo through the hospital room. What? The umbilical cord is wrapped around her neck. A C-section would put my wife at risk. Inside the delivery room, the wealthiest man in the country, Leonard Gardner, was losing it. Figure it out. Save my wife, not the child. If anything happens to her, I'll burn this entire hospital to the ground. Floating in the womb, I sighed. So this was my overbearing billionaire dad. Wow, he really did love my mom. He was devoted, one of a kind. My mom was truly blessed. Then, as if someone had hit pause, both the raging billionaire and the sobbing heiress froze mid-freakout. They stared at each other, stunned. I smiled. Bingo. They heard me. That confirmed the heart voice skill was real and directional. I could aim it, pick who heard what, with complete control and total stealth. Back in our previous lives, my sister had the same gift, but she never figured out how to use it. Hers was stuck in broadcast mode, every thought she had, no matter how nasty, blasted through the whole room. So when she heard Leonard shout, "Save my wife, not the child," she totally lost it. What kind of idiot says that out loud? Faking the devoted husband thing for show? Please. That his mistress already had a litter of kids for him. What a fraud. Naturally, her tantrum turned the entire delivery room into chaos. Judy Gardner, now my mom, was already emotional, and hearing those thoughts pushed her over the edge. The poor man had to fall to his knees, swearing eternal love, just to calm her down. Then the baby came, my sister, and the billionaire didn't even look at her. He clutched his wife like she was the only thing that mattered. My sister started her usual snark. "I'm your baby, remember? Not even a glance my way? And you're still putting on this act? What a joke." Just like that, the billionaire's expression hardened. He ordered the nurses to take her away, and his wife spiraled into paranoia, convinced the baby wasn't a blessing but a cursed mistress reborn to seduce her husband. She was hated before she even opened her eyes. But me? I was going to rewrite the story. This time, they wouldn't just like me, they'd adore me. I activated the heart voice skill again. Why are Daddy Leon and Mommy Judy crying because of me? No, I don't want them to cry. I'll be strong for them. Then I turned toward the ultrasound probe, grabbed the cord wrapped around my neck and slowly unwrapped it. 1 loop, 2 loops, done. Daddy and Mommy, baby fixed the bad cord all by herself. The room erupted. It's gone. She just unwrapped it herself. A miracle. My parents clutched each other, crying tears of joy. And my dad, ever the drama king, roared, "Reward everyone. $100,000 bonus for every staff member." While cheers filled the room, a scream rang out next door. "What do you mean complications? Get your top labor coach now." Ah, the washed-up actress, Vivian Lennox. My so-called mom. Even in rebirth, we were being born side by side. I smirked and whispered through the wall, "Hey, sis. You reincarnated first, so why aren't you out yet?" Oh, wait. Age before beauty, right? Chaos exploded. Vivian screamed as my sister thrashed inside her, throwing a tantrum that ended in an emergency C-section. Meanwhile, I made my grand entrance like a movie star, calm, radiant, and crying perfectly on cue. The room froze in awe. Even the doctor whispered, "An angel baby." Mom gathered me into her arms, laughing and crying all at once. "Leon, look at her. She stopped crying the moment I held her. She's even smiling at me." My dad's eyes filled with tears. "She didn't want you to suffer. That's our little girl." He named me Lucy Pearl Gardner, Heaven's Precious Pearl, and launched a foundation in my name, transferring 5% of the Gardner Group's shares to it. Meanwhile, in the next room, my sister was making her debut as the screaming debt collector. Her mother didn't even look at her, just handed her off to a nurse and left. I was wrapped in warmth, drifting off to sleep when a shadow fell over me. A pale, handsome face with amber eyes gazed down, cold, unreadable. The foster brother. The one who ruined my sister's life. But this time, things would be different. I reached out with my tiny hands. "Hug." Gasps filled the room. My mom's eyes sparkled. "Lance, she already likes you." He froze, then gently held me. His eyes softened, and he unclasped the ivory pendant from his neck, placing it around mine. This was my mother's. "Now it'll protect you." My heart swelled. He had given me the only thing connecting him to his mom. From that day on, he visited me daily. Slowly, his icy demeanor began to melt. Whenever I grabbed his hand, he blushed to his ears. Soon, he was mixing my formula, feeding me, holding me with reverence. I refused breast milk, slept through the night, and pressed the nurse's button instead of crying. The staff adored me. "Pearl's a genius baby," they said. Meanwhile, my sister, beautiful as porcelain, started humming lullabies with her mom, who paraded her around like a trophy. But soon, reality would hit. Vivian's sugar daddy slammed the door in her face and threw her cash to disappear. Rage consumed her. She poured every ounce of it into shaping her daughter into a weapon, forcing perfection until it broke her. She only let her sleep 4 hours a day, trained her relentlessly, and used her pain for fame. By 18, my sister was a superstar. But empty. Broken. And now, in this life, I was living the dream she thought she stole. This time, I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to win. I don't remember the exact moment I decided to weaponize tenderness, only that it started with a bottle and a bruise. I was 3 months old when I discovered the heart voice could be more than a whisper of comfort in a delivery room. It worked on stressed nurses, on the flustered pediatrician who kept dropping his pen, on my father's bored assistant who took a late-night call while standing at the nursery window and thought, absently, how small I was, how impossible. The trick was precision. I never sprayed the room with a fog of thought. I slid meaning into one person at a time like a pressed flower into a book. When my father came home late and hovered by my crib, kissing my mother's hair a dozen times like a man casting spells, I sent him a small, neat sentence, "You look tired." "Let's sit," he said. When my mother woke from a nightmare about hospitals and hands and losing me to a cord that squeezed like a fist, I said 2 words into her like a pin fastening silk, "I'm here." She slept. And Lance, my new, quiet planet, circled closest. He wasn't the sociopath my sister had told me he was. He was a silence with edges. You find different names for the way certain boys are trained to hold their breath through childhood. Some call them cold. I called him careful. Careful boys watch everything until they have a plan. Careful boys don't cry because crying is something you do around people who haven't taught you the cost of it. The bruise appeared on his wrist when he was 14 and I was barely sitting up. A pale ring where a watch had been yanked hard. He tried to tuck it behind the sleeve of his school blazer when he came to visit me that day. He lifted me with the same reverence he always used, like I was a difficult, beautiful truth. "Did someone hurt you?" I nested the question between the beats of his pulse. He stiffened, then loosened, his inner voice opened like a door you don't realize was locked until it swings. "No. Not me. I hurt someone else." The images came muted and fast, the way the gardener had cornered one of the maids at a loading dock, the way Lance's hand had closed over the man's wrist, the sharp twist, the gasp. Violence as intervention. Lance's heart made a flat decision, never again on my grounds. The bruise was the man's watch, a scrape against bone when he tried to wrench free. I slipped a thought back to him so carefully that if he turned around to look for the speaker he would have found only light. "You did the right thing. But next time call security. You're allowed help." He went still. Then he smiled. The kind that knows it isn't alone anymore. That was the first day he called me Pearl and not Lucy because, as he explained in his real voice to my mother later, she's small and bright, and I'd be a monster to drop her. By the time I turned 2, he had become the kind of guardian the tabloids wrote fan fiction about. Adopted heir dotes on Gardner miracle baby, they said, and the comments went on and on, if only my big brother looked at me that way. If only somebody had ever. My sister had a magazine cover too, only hers was lit like a warning. Vivian Lennox returns, baby in tow. Mother and daughter stared out like porcelain held to a camera flash. Vivian's smile was made of expensive exhaustion. The baby, my twin, though no one knew, was a perfect little moon, wide-eyed and still. They named her Serafina, because of course they did. It's the kind of name you give a child when you want to be congratulated for your taste. We met for the first time in a charity hospital wing when we were 3. The event had been Judy's idea. If the foundation has my daughter's name, then my daughter should see what her name does, she told my father and kissed his stern, beautiful mouth until he stopped saying things like legal risk and exposure. The Gardner Foundation had refurbished a neonatal ICU. We went to cut the ribbon. I wore a tiny cream coat with velvet buttons. Lance wore a tie he hated, which he loosened the instant we got out of the car. Cameras hummed like locusts. Vivian arrived late, like a woman convinced the party could not morally begin until her perfume walked in. She wore a white suit the exact color of the walls so she would look like the room was built to hold her. She held Serafina like a clutch bag. I felt my sister before I saw her, the way you feel warm thunder rolling over the spine. Her inner voice was a hive, furious and bright. She was trying so hard to hold it back, to keep from broadcasting, but every time she winced, every time a camera lens narrowed, the thoughts broke out and ran. What do they want? They want the miracle girl. They want the husband with the castle and the wife with the roses tattooed on her wrists. They want to weigh me against her. They want to say whose smile is worth more. She was a child, yet she already thought in currencies. I slipped my voice like a silver wire to a single place in her chest. I'm over here, Sarah. She stopped breathing. Then, without looking for me, she looked for me, chin turning, scan, and found me in Judy's arms on the dais next to the plastic incubator with a stuffed giraffe inside. Her eyes flashed, liquid mercury. For a second I saw the girl from the last life, older and nearly godlike on stage, 1,000 awards melting under the heat of her rage. I braced for the kick. It didn't come. She broke into a smile so sudden the reporters surged forward like a flock. She was perfect. Her smile had geometry, a curve that made you think of kindness because it looked like it. "Hi," she said out loud, for the microphones. "Are you Pearl?" No one else noticed that her inner voice was whispering through clenched teeth, "I will ruin you with a single breath." "Hi," I said, because the world would have demanded it even if we'd been holding knives. "You're pretty." We stood there like two diamonds cut into the same shape by different wars. Lance came closer, his hand hovered behind my back, not quite touching, never pushing. My father said a short speech about grants. Judy cried, because babies and cameras were the two surest ways to turn her into a fountain. Vivian laughed gorgeously at something no one had said. Serafina's voice slipped and slid. "The room is a mouth. It will eat me if I don't feed it first." I tucked one idea into her and only her. "You don't have to give it anything you don't want to give." She flinched as if someone had banged a pan behind her head. Then she went very still. "Can I hold her?" she asked, chin lifting, not to me, but to Judy, who could no more deny a child a fairy tale request on camera than she could step out of her 6-inch heels. I went into Serafina's arms and felt her hands shake. She smelled like clean starch and stage makeup, like something made to be looked at. Her inner voice squeaked and fractured under the weight. "If I drop you, they will say I did it on purpose." "You won't," I told her. "And if you did, I'd float." She laughed in her throat. For an instant the hive quieted, like bees all settling at once. Then a flash strobed in a corner and she heard, from someone whose hairpins were too tight and whose shoes were too new for the job, a thought that wasn't cruel so much as automatic: poor Vivian. Her daughter's so stiff. Like a doll. Serafina's broadcast blew out of her like steam. "Not stiff. Perfect. You'll eat your words and choke on them, and I won't help." A nurse at the back of the room jolted. You could watch the wave hit, the way shoulders tensed in an odd, synchronized ripple, and anyone who had ever stood near Serafina enough times would tell you later that this was always the moment something soured. She looked back at Vivian, who, hearing the same riptide, panicked that her daughter had embarrassed her on live feeds and pinched her arm lightly, smiling so hard it split her lip gloss. For the record, I did not forgive Vivian because she never struck hard. There are bruises so faint you only see them in memory, under blacklight. There are women who never raise their voices because they learned young that whispers go deeper. It would have been easy to hate my sister that day and never stop. But it would also have been boring, and if I know anything about children born with knives for tongues, it's that boredom is piranhas in a shallow river. They'll eat you to the bone if you stand still. I resolved, because I could, because Killian Draven had handed me a scalpel years before I could hold my head up, to cut a different story. The first cut was inside our house. My father's love for Judy was a cathedral, beautiful but badly engineered for earthquakes. If anything jarred the foundation, if a magazine said she was aging, if a stylist joked that she should try bangs, if Judy herself woke up and felt unlit, my father shook. His mind rearranged itself around the emergency, every time, with the ruthlessness of the CEO triaging a crashing market. Fire the publicist. Buy the PR firm. Silence the reporter. Invite the reporter to dinner and give them an unrefusable scholarship to their kid's school with a note that said, "For a bright future." The note would be in my father's impeccable, blocky handwriting. He is a good man who believes that love can be proved with receipts. I learned to slide unmarketable thoughts into him. When he paced, I gave him weight. When he rewrote the family's calendar to orbit Judy's photo shoots, I gave him let her choose. When he clamped a hand around the back of Lance's neck because a stock chart dipped and needed punishing, I gave him a stop. Sometimes he stopped in the middle of a hallway like a man who'd walked into an invisible wall. Then embarrassment bloomed up his throat. "What am I doing?" And he turned that embarrassment into an apology, as if he'd scripted it the day before and just rediscovered his lines. Judy found the spine she hadn't needed until she did. She began to tell him no with a voice like chamomile you've steeped too long. "Leonard. Enough." She learned no is a spice, not a meal. The second cut was within a boy. Lance would have burned quietly from the inside out if left alone. He never planned a future. He planned exits. He bought 3 phones not because he needed them but so that no one could take the last one away. He knew every blind spot on every camera on every Gardner property. He carried 2 knives and a folding toothbrush. I placed a single thought in him on a spring day when the sour orange trees in the kitchen court made the air taste like rind. You're allowed to want something that lasts. He looked at me like I'd announced a crime. It's not illegal, I said, out loud this time, because some things do better above the water. To want, I mean. He went to run laps until the wanting turned into lactic acid and pain. When he came back, I was on the floor with a puzzle I had outgrown and kept on purpose. He lay flat on the tile and stared at the ceiling, and I lay next to him and counted the little black pepper flecks in the stone. You'll forget, he said. Everything? Me. I wanted to say never. It is unwise to promise eternity to a boy who believes the universe buys eternity wholesale and resells it as abandonment. So I reached over and pressed one puzzle piece into the hollow at the base of his throat, where the pendant sometimes lay when he wasn't wearing it. What if I make it your job to make sure I don't? He startled like a fawn. Then he rolled onto his side and propped his head on his hand and nodded, once. I could smell the citrus on his skin. It was the first job he ever took that didn't involve breaking a lock or a rib. He began to choose training that meant he'd be near and not nowhere, Krav Maga so he could teach me how to fall properly, languages because our house absorbed ambassadors like it absorbed light, surveillance pattern analysis because he discovered he liked the clean logic of it and could do it from a room 2 doors down from mine. He still carried knives. He still slept with his back to the wall. But when I went on stage at 8 to play a tiny pianist in a charity gala and looked up, he was standing by the left aisle exit with his hands behind his back and his eyes on me, and when the applause roared like tap water in a tub he didn't leave, didn't vanish, didn't move at all. After, he told me the left exit's latch stuck sometimes. He'd oiled it. He said it like a confession. You tell me that is not love, and I will ask you what else you would call a person who learns the hinges of your life and keeps them soft. The third cut was a map of the city. Serafina's career rose in a straight, punishing line the way rockets go up when no one tells engineers to stop. Vivian did not sleep. She slept only when the camera did. She found coaches who guaranteed perfect enunciation by age 4. She found a ballet teacher who wrote a book about suffering and meant it. She took away soft socks because they spoiled a foot's good pain. She smiled on red carpets with a light in her eyes you couldn't place until you saw it weeks later in a photo of a hawk. I could not unmother a mother. I could, however, put friction under her. I found an entertainment lawyer very good at the kind of careful paperwork that saves children at 19 when they're past calls to collect, and I put into his head the idea that he would see Vivian in a grocery store line, pay for her groceries, and tell her about trust structures as if they were a fairy tale. It happened 3 days later because the world is full of men who believe in fate when a beautiful woman looks directly at them. He did not pay for her groceries, she would have killed him to make the headline. But he talked papers. She signed one she didn't read because she never read what looked like acknowledgement. That paper was the slowest fuse I ever lit. At 10 I played a prodigy on a streaming show that made me famous but not yet dangerous. People argued on forums about whether I could actually sing. I could. I never did it the same way twice because perfection is a disease and I had already watched it rot a girl I still called mine. Judy taped my scripts to the fridge and drew hearts in the margins next to lines she liked. My father bought me a piano and asked which kind sounded like the inside of a cloud. A warm one, I said, and he bought something made of trees old enough to have learned patience. It was the year Serafina fainted on live TV. She was 12, a guest on some late-night show that made children into objects for men whose jokes were ladders leaned against whichever house had the most lights on. The host asked if she had a boyfriend. Serafina smiled and said, I have 10, and her inner voice said, that'll give you something to write on your cue cards, and she kept smiling until her face forgot what blood felt like. She felt like a paper person. Vivian lunged. The clip went around the world twice and came back wearing dresses and captions. When I went to bed that night, Killian Draven sat on my window seat like he'd been poured there. He wears black not because he likes drama, though he does, but because it is the color that refuses to explain itself. Well? He asked, like a man who'd started a chess clock. Well, what? You're using it. His eyes flicked over the air in front of me like he could see the threads I tied. Some would call that cheating, Pearl. They would be correct. You aren't asking, he said mildly. You're telling. You gave me a hammer and the address of a house with bad walls. I am hammering. He inclined his head as if I'd just made a donation to a charity he respected. You still haven't asked the obvious question. What did she miss, I said, the day you split us? Killian stretched one long leg and crossed the other over the ankle like a cat daring the night to comment on its beauty. The clause that ends the experiment, he said. The way out. My mouth tasted like the hush before a storm. What is it? A choice, he said. The kind that looks like loss from the outside. The heart voice and the beauty are both magnifiers. They build you toward a peak and then hold you there long enough to see if you will jump. Jump into what? An unlabeled life, he said softly. You have to choose the other girl. You have to choose her once, truly, without arranging the scene so you come out shining. You have to do it at the precise moment the world would pay most to see you keep your place. That's all? I asked. That's the price? He grinned, teeth like foresight. It's steep, I know. Don't worry. You'll see it when you arrive. He vanished the way important truths do. He didn't. 3 years later, I stood under a lighting rig that smelled like dust and heat and found the edge. By then the city had grown used to us. The pair of us, Pearl Gardner with her pretty show and her angel foundation, Serafina Lennox with her blade of a career and a mother who loved ambition like other women love men, were parallel lines. The tabloids tried to cross us weekly. Sometimes we breathed each other's air. We did a commercial together for a juice company that thought vitamins could be sexy. We recorded a holiday album where our voices braided like hair. We weren't friends. We were old enemies who happened to use the same streets. Lance had become head of personal security for the family at 20, not because of nepotism but because my father had noticed that hate died in his presence. Men who came to blackmail my father left with jobs and health insurance and stock options that vested slowly enough to cultivate gratitude. Women who stalked me online received restraining orders mailed with handwritten notes that said I'm sorry you hurt and also my house is not the place to bring your pain to fix. He went to therapy in secret and told me after 6 months because the waiting had turned to stone in his throat. I didn't want to fail in front of you, he said, and then, shaking, you're the only thing I've ever tried to do right on purpose. I wanted to say the world, but I said, you have. We came to the award show that winter because the world wanted to say we were both its daughters. The show occupied a theater so old it always smelled of dust even after polished people scrubbed it with money. Our car stopped beneath the marquee. Cameras flared. Lance got out first and scanned and then turned, offering his hand to me like I was a queen and the stares were treachery he would take into himself if they snapped. Inside, you could feel the building thinking about all the applause it had held, like a body remembering sex. I did not plan to win. The category was stacked with women whose hands shook less than mine. Serafina arrived 20 minutes after we did and 20 minutes before the show started, right on the lip of rude. Vivian's dress had been poured on from a height, the neckline recognized no gods. They sat 2 rows behind and 3 seats left, a position neither close enough to make allies nor far enough to make us strangers. When the host read the names, the room's attention went brittle. I tasted metal. I didn't need the heart voice to hear the gamblers revise their odds. I didn't use it. I never used it on rooms because rooms aren't people, they're appetites dressed like approval. And the award goes to. He said my name with the nasal gallop of a man who'd grown up trying not to sound like where he came from. Judy crushed my fingers, my father stood so fast his knees hit the seat. Lance did not move. He made stillness feel like a ramp built under my feet. I rose, and the theater shifted into that hush that means, we will memorize how you walk. I walked. I took the award. It weighed less than you think, like someone had made a machine of glory and filed it hollow so it wouldn't hurt wrists. I said the thank yous like teeth I needed to keep clean. I looked down at the band on my wrist that read Pearl Fund in tiny letters and thought of incubators and giraffe toys and men who believed in receipts. I said names like prayers. That was when the theater started to think about fire. You know how panic works when you're used to hearing voices other people don't? It comes as chorus. Not the big shout, the small ones underneath. The lighting tech whose inner voice hiccuped, did anyone check the breaker box? The producer whose mind said calmly like a mother to a child, not now, not tonight, not with all these people, we can't afford it. The usher who thought of the exit doors sticking. Little flames, licking. I saw the smoke not with my eyes but in the way Serafina's back straightened 2 rows behind me. She had always lived 20 seconds ahead of everyone else. She saw stories before they happened and planted herself where the camera would find her best. She angled her jaw. She rose. The theater became a glistening beast. It turned its faces. She put one hand on Vivian's arm and Vivian, for the first time I had ever seen, looked afraid of her child. The smoke arrived a beat later, politely, like a rumor that decided to be true. It rolled from the left wing like a gray scarf dragged by a hurried hand. Then the alarm hit, a sound designed to make thought impossible. I should tell you 2 things. 1, there are fires and there are fires. The one that night was an electrical snarl chewing on cables, a shabby accident made ravenous by heat. 2, a camera loves girls who look brave. Serafina stopped halfway to the aisle, head up, shoulders square, perfect. This is the part where I pretend the choice surprised me. It did not. I felt it the way you feel a song building under your ribs when a band you adore reaches for the note that will ruin you. If I led people to the wrong exit and a crush started, we would stack death like coats. If I used the voice on everyone at once, 100 minds might fracture, and the next time they heard their own thoughts they might not trust them. If I stayed on stage, I could be the still center, and the still center in a room that wants movement becomes a martyr. If I ran, no one would blame me. If I chose my sister, I would hand her my knight. I jumped. Not the kind you make with legs. The kind the claws required. I spoke into exactly one mind in the entire theater, the way a surgeon makes exactly one cut. I braided a thought into Serafina so clean she could mistake it, later, for her own, not this way. The camera isn't the exit. Look up, see the left rigging. The cable sparking. If that falls, the owl dies. Turn to the center, take row D, seat 12, he's come, follow his spine. Now. She moved like she belonged to the world instead of the room. This way, she shouted, turning her back to the lens, pointing, away from herself, toward the ordinary man who had been waiting his whole shy life to be useful without glory. The audience flowed, and when the rigging belched sparks like a dragon changing its mind, the owl closest to the stage was not full yet. The cable fell and hissed on the floor and died with a sulk. I went another way. I found the old stage manager, the woman who had lived 30 years in the building's bones and knew which door swung wide and which slide. I slid 3 words into her like a password, West Stairwell Sticks. She spun, swore like my father, and shoved a wedge into the hinge that kept the door from locking when it thought no one was looking. And then, I turned to my mother. Judy was white with terror and beauty. She kept hold of my father's sleeve like a girl in a story who forgets the way out until the boy says follow me. But my father, for once, did not know the path. He was thinking in assets and sprinklers. That is not a way to the street. I pressed a thought into him that was not a request but a permission he had never given himself. You can let go of the room and keep us. He exhaled like a diver surfacing. He did. Lance? I said, because some names are also anchors. Go, he said. Left. I'll take the right. If smoke rises there first, I'll cut through. Don't you dare die, I said, because I was 15 and old enough to boss death around like a cat. He grinned, showing the first wolf I'd seen in him in a year. Not tonight. We made it out because old buildings remember their secrets to those who ask correctly. The crowd bellowed into the cold. No one trampled, not really. The city's fire swarmed in the street and ate the heat because it knew this building like a cousin. And there she was, Serafina, drawn to me the way arguments are drawn to kitchens. Her cheeks glowed with heat and triumph. Cameras stuttered. The world had already decided how to tell the story. Vivian's daughter, poised, gardener's girl, crying, fire, metaphor, bravery, currency. Vivian swept up behind her, arm outstretched for embrace or headline. I could not see which. Sarah stopped 3 feet from me and broke, not into tears but into nakedness. For the first time in years she didn't aim her face like a weapon. It was you, she said. Her voice was a thin, precise blade. You put a map in my head. Vivian's smile twitched, a tear scenting a new kind of hunt. Darling? It was you at the hospital, Sarah said to me, not looking away. It's always been you. She said it for me, but the cameras heard her and did what cameras do, turned it into a public marriage. The world would chew this scene for days, then weeks, then on this day 2 years from now. You cannot hand your rival your miracle on national television and keep your place. You cannot announce that you used a voice no one admits exists and keep your myth. I felt my name loosening from the building's marquee, letter by letter. Here was the jump. Killian's claws sighed in my ear like a maker satisfied, yes. I did not argue. I handed Serafina the only thing I had of value in that second, my quiet. I didn't tell the story. I didn't claim the choice. I let the narrative fold itself around her shoulders like a coat in winter and said only, I'm glad you listened. Vivian lunged, not at me but at the camera crew to acquire the rights to her daughter's rescue. She grabbed a mic with a grip that could have cracked gold. My girl, she cried, voice beautifully shredded, is a hero. Stop, Serafina said. She said it out loud and with her heart, and the ladder shook the air. It shook Vivian so hard her hand fell. It shook the TV anchor enough that he stopped talking over a woman. Sarah turned, lifted her chin, and showed the country the bruise at the base of her throat where mic tape had ripped last week when someone switched out her costume without asking. No more, she said, very simply, as if ordering coffee. 100 women who had been daughters of that sound, the one mothers make when they don't remember where they end and you begin, sat up on couches and cried at a wall. The days after were teeth. The award show crawled back to life with statements and donors. No one had died. They were proud of that like a city is proud of winter ending on schedule. The coverage poured in, all the easy angles sharpening on cue, Vivian's little phoenix. Pearl's improbable humility. Lance's shadow handsome shape in every picture behind me, a man you Google and learn nothing from except that he makes vanished things less gone. The paper I'd arranged years earlier hatched. It began with a petition. The lawyer with the grocery line missionary zeal filed it on behalf of a minor child whose mother's management might constitute a conflict of interest under a set of clauses that required a translator even lawyers had to hire. It asked for a guardian ad litem. It asked for scrutiny. It asked with the voices of pediatricians and a school counselor and a ballet teacher who had once written a book about suffering and meant it and now, at 60, could not stop crying at night because she had watched a girl make her mouth into a knife so many times she heard the sound of it while shelling peas. Vivian reacted like an animal whose reflection refused to obey. She would have set the city on fire and served it to the judge on a white plate if the news cycle had asked. She hired men who lied effectively for money. She went on morning shows and called it misogyny to question a mother. She called Serafina ungrateful, softly, beautifully, like a poem about hard bread. Sarah did not film for 2 months. She slept like a person hearing rain for the first time. She walked funny because she didn't know where to put her arms when no one was grading the angle of her elbows. People decided she was pretentious. People decided she was in trouble. People will always decide. That is their religion. We met, not on camera, on a bench whose paint peeled like a child's scab by the river that cuts the city in two. Lance stood 50 feet away and looked like a man who could listen and end a war at the same time. My father had spent the morning on the phone convincing donors that fire was exciting, not scary. Judy had bought a picnic basket we didn't open, then gone home to rearrange the orchids so they faced exactly the light they liked. You gave me your night, Serafina said. I didn't ask for it. I know. And you helped. Before. The baby thing. The hospital. The cord, I said. Yes. She laughed, one shocked breath. Of course you did. We looked at the water doing its patient violence to stone. Her inner voice was quieter now, not because she had learned to shoebox it but because it had gotten tired of starving. You can starve a voice or feed it so much it chokes. Neither gives you music. She had started to ask it questions. It was answering like a teenager, rude then honest. Why do you care? She asked. The dangerous thing was how raw her face was with it. If I had lied, she would have believed me. Because I'm tired, I said. Of the version where we are weapons with one target. She stared like I had bobbled the ball on the goal line and it offended her sense of narrative. You stole my place, she said, without invitation, trying it out, watching me for the flinch. Which one? The womb. The stage. The men, she said the last like a person naming the weather. I stole the only thing worth taking, I said. Time. From who? From whatever machine would have chewed you. From the one that would have kept me gold and glass until I cut myself to see if I bled. She looked away. Her profile was a rumor about forgiveness in a city that doesn't trade in it. Are you going to hate me if I win next year? She asked. Probably, I said. For 6 minutes. I'll send you a gift I chose with affection and spite in equal parts. She smiled, and something ancient in my chest, older than the hospital, older than the mirror, loosened. The word sister is a riddle because it holds both enemy and home. There is a version of the story where we leaned forward that day and started to plot a lifetime of gentle, watchful days where love did not look like a cage. There is also the city we live in. The court appointing the guardian ad litem did not fix Vivian, it made her bright with fury. She retaliated with a documentary that would have been elegant if it had not been so false. She hired a private investigator to dig under our walls. She dug up the adoption papers from a decade ago and tried to turn my brother into a headline so big no one could see the human underneath. She called him dangerous in ways that would keep him from applying to mortgages later. That was her mistake. Monsters do not know how to startle a boy who was raised by doors that locked from the outside. They cannot scare a person who has made a map of fear and taped it to his mirror to memorize. Lance stepped in front of the cameras once, only once, and spoke in a voice so quiet even microphones had to lean. You don't own my story, he said. And if you touch my sister again, I will buy your building and turn it into a shelter named after the first girl you called crazy. It went viral because he looked like a ruin and a cathedral at the same time. Men tried to put him into a discourse. The discourse refused to hold him because he was not made out of its materials. The year turned. Serafina did not go back to her show. She went to court. She stood up straight next to the lawyer I had seated into her life and said words that trembled but did not fall. Vivian's face acted at her from across the room. Cheat codes don't beat mothers in rooms built for men. The judge was not a man who'd bought her perfume. The judge was a woman whose daughter had once been told to stand on the scale and be brave. The order placed someone between them until Sarah was legal enough to be her own bridge. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, time. We got on with the business of not breaking. My father learned to love what he could not control without trying to buy it again every morning. Judy learned that orchids will tell you what they want if you stop Googling them. Lance learned to sleep 6 hours in a row and then, later, 7, like a person inching into a lake. I learned to say no to scripts that mistook suffering for plot. I cut my hair to my jaw and watched a city discover that girls can look like ideas, not prospects. Killian came one more time, on a night when the rain made the streets look like piano keys. He didn't sit. He leaned against the window like a confession I was not yet ready to make. "Well?" he asked. "Well. You jumped." "Yes." "Do you regret it?" "Only when I'm hungry and read the comments." He smiled, a little rude now, less theater. "The clause is satisfied." "So it ends?" I asked. "We wake up in the old life? We swap? What, learn a lesson the hard way and go back to homework?" He shook his head. "No. You keep what you chose. You keep the consequences too." "What about the gifts?" I asked. "The voice. The face." "Beauty decays into personhood if it's used right," he said, like a man tasting a complicated wine and approving. "As for the voice, consider it a muscle. You've toned it. You can let it atrophy if you wish. Or you can keep lifting what needs lifting with it until you're done." "When will I be done?" "When you can say the word sister without needing to make it a weapon." "I already can," I said. He arched a brow. "Try it on a bad day." He left with a faint scent of cold. I slept with the window cracked and dreamed of a stage with no lights where 2 little girls sat cross-legged and compared scissors. The last time the city measured us against each other, they did it with a headline so weary it read like a sigh: Sarah L. turns down role every star wanted, Pearl G signs on to produce. Women with coffee in their hands read it and did not smile, they simply put their cups down softer than before. Sarah sent me a link with no text. I sent her back an emoji of an egg because new lives are ridiculous first. We went to the Foundation's 10th anniversary gala together. We stood under the chandelier shaped like a thought. The NICU we'd cut the ribbon on years ago had outgrown itself twice. 2 incubators still had giraffes. The staff had learned to note signs of mothers coming apart and send them to someone who knew what to do. We hung a plaque for a nurse who had found her middle after grief took her edge. Vivian didn't come. She had a movie to shoot in a world still eager to believe a certain shape of sorrow when it wore diamonds. We sent her an invitation anyway, without a note. We are not saints, but we aren't the people we used to be either. My father danced exactly once, with Judy, to a song from the decade they first learned each other, the slow kind that makes a room into a lake. He didn't check his phone during. He looked at her like he hadn't finished learning her yet. That's the only miracle I ever ask for anymore, the motion of a person becoming more themselves instead of less. Lance stood off to the side in a suit that made the women at table 9 turn predatory. He watched me laugh, then watched the exits, then watched me laugh again. After, when I toed off my shoes on the marble at home and sat on the bottom stair like a tired debutante, he came and crouched on the step below me and rested his arms across my knees like an oath you can touch. "I thought it would feel more like winning," he said. "What would?" "All of it. The getting through." "It feels like breathing," I said. "Sometimes that's the prize." He nodded, slow. "You know I would do it again," he said, and his inner voice, ever careful, ever afraid of its own hunger, didn't add the things it used to add, even if it killed me, even if you stopped liking me, even if they locked me out of the house afterwards. He just meant the thing he said, clean. "I know," I said. I leaned forward until our foreheads touched. The pendant he'd given me as a baby lay cool on my collarbone. It wasn't protection anymore. It was a reminder that he had once been brave enough to put what he loved in my keeping. Later, when the house had shifted into the deep quiet it made only after my father's last email and Judy's last teacup, my phone buzzed. A photo from Serafina, a bowl of noodles, steam, chopsticks crossed wrong, captioned, "Is this how normal people eat at 11 p.m.? I sent her a photo of my bare feet on the step and wrote, "Yes, with blisters." She called. We didn't talk about mothers. We didn't talk about fire. We talked about a cat she thought about adopting and didn't because commitment made her throat itch, about a book neither of us finished because it made grief too cheap, about an audition I turned down because I didn't want to let a man's script use my face as shorthand for fragile. She said, abruptly, "Do you still hear me?" "Sometimes," I said. "What am I thinking now?" That you wish I'd say no so you could be mad at me for something real. She laughed, a crack, and then, honey. I hate how right you are. I know. How do you turn it off? She asked, soft. I listen to music, I said. Very loud. Or I put my face in a dog's fur. Or I tell someone in my head that I'm done for the day and they should come back tomorrow, and sometimes they do. That works? Not always. Often enough. Silence, breathing. Then, can we keep trying? We can, I said. We're allowed to want something that lasts. That sounds like him, she said, meaning Lance, and I pictured the way he'd pressed his arms across my knees, and I didn't say yes or no. Some truths you leave outside where the weather can get at them and prove they'll stand. I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of the dark nursery. Judy still refused to repaint because she couldn't untie the ritual of standing there at night and listening to the city hold itself together. I put my hands on the windowsill. The glass was cool. Somewhere out there a siren yawned. Somewhere a woman decided to put the knife down and wash her face. Somewhere a boy matched a key to a lock and thought, what if I stayed? Thank you, I said, to the empty room, to a king who sat with his feet on my windowsill and asked me if I wanted to be good or merely adored, to a sister who had learned to aim her mouth at truth, to a brother who catalogued hinges like prayers, to a father practicing letting go, to a mother who made orchids face the sun, to the baby I had been with a cord around her neck and courage in her fingers. The world did not answer. It didn't need to. There isn't a moral, except maybe this: the spotlight is a tool, not a god. Point it at a stage and it will make a girl look holy. Point it at a door and it will show you the way out. Sometimes you don't have to pick. Sometimes, if you jump when the clause arrives and you do not build a trampoline under yourself to bounce you back into the same old act, the light becomes something else entirely. Not a fire. A lighthouse. The next morning I woke to a text from Serafina, come to set? Not mine. A friend's. I want to watch something I don't have to carry. Also there's a dog. We went. We sat in folding chairs with our names taped on wrong and let other people make pretend for us while a golden mutt leaned its whole weight on our shins. When we laughed at the same scene, we did not check to see who laughed first. When the dog sneezed and the sound made two grips drop a sandbag because they were trying not to laugh and failing, we looked at each other without the arithmetic of a ledger. Later, a runner brought noodles in paper bowls. We ate them like teenagers. We crossed the chopsticks wrong on purpose. On the way out, a PA who had grown up in a town you could fold into your pocket asked for a photo. We gave it. She bounced on her toes. You too, she said, you changed my, the way I think about, you know. About what? Serafina asked, a smile sliding into place more slowly these days, as if built from smaller, calmer parts. About having to be only one thing, the girl said, then flushed. Sorry. That sounded stupid in my head. It didn't, I said. It sounded like a new map. We walked into the afternoon like two women who had decided to be difficult to market. We stopped for ice cream even though it hurt our teeth. Lance shadowed a half block behind, pretending to argue with my father on the phone about whether the Knicks deserved mercy this season. Judy texted a photo of sunlight on orchids. Killian did not appear. That night, in my very quiet room, I turned the heart voice down until it hummed low enough to feel like blood and listened to the apartment settle and the city breathe. I slept without dreaming of bombs. In the morning, when headlines tried to measure our worth in inches again, they found there wasn't a ruler for this. It wasn't that we had made ourselves saints. It was that we had become a story not shaped for their page. If you're waiting for a wedding, pick one. My life is full of them now. The kind where a lawyer swears to protect the part of a girl that has nothing to do with contracts. The kind where a boy puts knives away before breakfast. The kind where two sisters choose each other on a Tuesday and call it enough. Sometimes, very late, when I can't tell if the city is sleeping or pretending, I hear Killian laugh from the scene where night turns. It's not triumph. It's relief that the experiment can be closed with 2 signatures and a small, steady life. Enjoy being the new freak of the family, my sister told me, years ago, before we knew what the word meant. Freaks are just miracles whose paperwork got lost. We found ours and filed it under something boring and precious. We called it kept.